The trousers I wear to work are really boring, so I decided to make new ones complete with unknown Pokémon. Like many people, I have to wear black trousers to work, but my managers don't mind us adding little things to them. So I thought it'd be really cute to make a pair of trousers that's a little bit more exciting by adding some little unknown Pokémon to them. Unknowns are very simple and very structured Pokémon that don't have tons of detail that would be considered distracting, so I think they are the perfect Pokémon for this project. Design-wise, I really wanted these trousers to be as practical as possible for my particular job, and I have to carry a radio with me at all times. So I wanted to have deep pockets with a strap over the top of them that I could either clip the radio to directly or wrap my earpiece around. This way I won't have to worry about my radio falling out my pocket, which it does a lot currently. With the design set, I then moved on to patterning. To start this, I took a few measurements that I rounded up to ensure these pieces would still fit even if I forgot to add seam allowance later. Using these measurements, I then created a very simple pattern for the front and the back of the trousers, which are very simple and similar to how you do a regular trouser pattern, just with a lot of additional fabric on the front piece. You'll see later on that this ended up being relatively pointless because I did a lot of fit adjustments to this piece, but I do think this is a good pattern piece that I could definitely use for another piece of clothing. Next, I cut out my 4 leg pieces. To get the full length of the leg, I just cut all the way down to the bottom of my piece of fabric, knowing that it's definitely longer than I needed it to be. With all my main pieces cut out, I could then move on to sewing on my very important pocket. This started out very simple and got very convoluted later on, but we'll start with the simple stuff first. Firstly, I cut out the front sides of my pocket following the diagonal line and the outer seam of my front panels. For the depth of the pocket, I just did what felt right. I definitely could have done with making them a tad deeper, but they are good enough to fit what I need them to. I then sewed these pieces right sides together with the front panels along that diagonal line, flipped it onto the inside and then top stitched it into place. They would have been absolutely fine without the top stitching, I just prefer the look of this. Next, I cut out a rectangle piece of fabric, the same dimensions as the piece I just cut out without that diagonal cut taken out of it. This was then sewn directly onto the edges of the front panel and then onto the pocket piece I just added in the last step. And with this, I had a fully usable pocket, then on a different pattern piece could be left as is, but I wanted it to be a fold over pocket instead. This is the point where I started doing things in the wrong order and sewed that fold into place. And it did look very nice and neat, but it meant that I no longer had anywhere to hide the seams of my strap detail. But I didn't want the base trousers to be so simple, to the point where I could have just painted these unknowns onto my work trousers that I already own. So I decided it was best to unpick my work and add the strap in. But before I could get to the unpicking, I actually had to make the strap themselves. Firstly, I measured out how long I wanted the straps to be and cut out strips of fabrics double the length of these measurements, 4 for each side. Next, I sewed the strips together and flipped them the right way out to make tubes that I could then iron flat and thread through some metal fasteners to make the desired look. These were so fast and easy to make that they really make me want to make harnesses. Harnesses are such a good accessory because you can add them over anything, and they're so easy to make, as I just proved by making these straps in very little time. So I will definitely be using this technique to make more harnesses in the future. Anyways, with the straps now made, I then unpicked the little bit of stitching that I need to thread them underneath and sewed them onto the trousers. I needed to be able to thread them underneath this flap, otherwise the raw edges would be fully on display and it wouldn't look very nice. With that detail added, I then moved on to adding on my zipper. I have definitely said this before, but because I'm bad at sewing on zips, I don't film a lot of the process. It just stresses me out, to be honest. I will say this one was very well behaved and definitely came out a lot better than my last few attempts at this process, so maybe I'm slowly getting better at this. I just need to be a little more patient, I guess. After that, I sewed my front and back panels together to make a technically wearable piece. This is simply just following down those raw edges and making sure the crotch isn't off center. To be sure of this, I always start at the center and go down one leg and then down the other, because if you match the panels at the end of the legs, you might find that the pieces are actually slightly different lengths, which would mean the crotch seam is slightly crooked. And with long seams like this, it is so annoying to unpick them. It takes absolutely forever, so I want to avoid that as much as possible. We are now at that convoluted section of the fold because we are going to go back in and work it again. So I tried on the trousers and I really liked how they looked, but they are just a bit too baggy for a workplace. I felt like I was going to catch the fabric on things, so I decided to slim the legs down using that center fold as the seam. So once again, I unpicked that folded edge and cut the center of my trousers out to create a new seam. This way I could get that slimmer fit without sacrificing the look of the pockets, and I'm very glad I did this because removing the slight bit of excess fabric made these a lot more work appropriate. I also think they look a little bit more like work trousers because they often do have that center seam down the front. I will say on camera you can't really see it, but in person it does make them look a little bit smarter and a little bit more professional. With the fit all sorted, I then moved on to making the waistband. For this, I used the piece that I just cut off my trousers and cut them into nice neat rectangles. Then I sewed them into long lines and attached them all the way along the top edge. I originally made this very thick as I thought it would make them a little bit more interesting, but in the end I decided against this look and later folded it over to be a little bit thinner. I just didn't find the really thick look to be very flattering. Once I had the waistband, I then added elastic into the back of it. If you've seen me make trousers before, you will know that I'm a big fan of adjustable waistbands. I find them to be a lot more comfortable and make me worry a lot less about my weight, so I try and always include include them. For this one, I wanted that elasticated section to look a little bit more professionally than I normally do it, so I sewed over the elastic a few times to ensure that the excess fabric wouldn't bunch together more in one place than another. With that completed, I then sewed them directly onto my trousers. This part always takes longer than I think it will, because it's just a lot more fiddly to attach the elasticated edge to a non-elasticated edge, but I got there eventually. When I decided to fold it over later, I did do this completely by hand because I got really annoyed at my sewing machine doing it the first time and I didn't want to do it again. Finally, for the base trousers, I sewed on a button and a buttonhole. I did these both by hand and off camera because I really struggled to keep hand sewing in the shot. Basically, even if I had filmed it, you wouldn't be able to see it because my head would have been in the way or would have been completely off the frame. It just would have been pointless to film. With that said, the base trousers are actually done and I can finally add on my Pokémon. To paint the unknowns, I made a mixture of light grey acrylic paint and fabric medium so the designs would hopefully not come off in the wash. I am expecting them to fade as every time I paint in clothing, I've had a lot of fading. But with this particular piece, I don't think that will be a bad thing because it will just make the unknowns more subtle, and with these being work trousers, the more subtle the better. For each one, I started by painting the underside of a shot glass I have and pressing it down into the desired spot to get an almost perfect circle imprint. This could then be filled in with a paintbrush to create the eye section. After that, I picked the letter I wanted to do and used a very thin paintbrush to outline the desired shape around the eye. This way, all the unknowns were the same size and relatively circular. Obviously, it's difficult to make them perfectly round, but it was a lot easier to have a central circle to work off of. If you're not overly familiar with the unknowns, they actually make up the alphabet plus an exclamation and a question mark, so you can use them to spell out words. Originally, I wasn't actually going to write anything, as I knew that I would be placing the unknowns too far apart for anyone to actually be able to read it, but in the end, I decided to write out my own and my boyfriend's names to add a little bit of a hidden meaning to the piece. That makes it sound like the hidden meaning is that I'm gay, when that is not a hidden thing in the slightest. We do share 2 letters of our names, so I didn't write those out twice, making it so that I had 8 letters in total, 4 on each leg. I could have added more, but I didn't want to go overboard just in case my managers decided that they're a little bit too much for the workplace. It would be really sad if I'm told I can't wear them. I would also be very, very surprised if that happens, because I have a very obvious septum ring and dyed hair, and neither of those have ever been an issue for me. If the outline of a Pokemon or black trousers is the cutoff point, it's going to be very baffling. Once the light grey was very dry, I then painted in the black pupils. Originally, I was just going to leave a gap in the centre without paint for the pupils, but the first dye I did, I completely forgot and painted over the entire thing with the grey by mistake, meaning that I had to paint in the pupils after the fact, and because paint shows up differently in the light than fabric, I then had to paint the rest of them in this way also. Maybe I'm the only person that would notice this shine, but it would really annoy me if one of the Pokemon had a slightly different texture to the others. Once all my Pokemon were in place, I then ironed them in. The heat of the iron just really locks in the design and makes it less likely to come off in the wash. Editing me just coming in to say that I did then hem the trousers. I completely forgot to say this when I was originally filming the voiceover part of this video, but to hem them I used my other work trousers as a base to know how long I wanted them, folded them up and just sewed them all the way around in a circle. But with that said, this project is now done and I can finally show you the final result. I am so happy with how these came out. I feel like they are a good mix of professional and really fun at the same time. And I'm also very glad that I picked a very simple Pokemon to draw because I think I would have definitely struggled with anything more difficult than this. These took absolutely forever to draw. I took about 30 minutes on every single Pokemon, and then I had to leave it on the floor to dry for at least an hour before moving on to another one because I didn't want to accidentally get paint all over the piece by mistake. Obviously none of the Pokemon are perfect, but especially on this camera I feel like they look pretty darn perfect for a hand-painted piece, so I'm really happy with how these turned out. Trouser-wise, I don't really have much to say. They are a very practical piece of clothing, but they're not really my sort of style. I do really like this strap that I did over the pocket though, so I might add this onto other pieces in the future, just because it adds a little bit of texture and interest to a pocket, which is normally quite a boring piece of the clothing. With that said, I think I'm done with this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like down below, comment what else you'd like me to do, and subscribe as I do post a video every single week, and I'd love to see you again. But until then, bye!